everybody. This is Steve Alkin Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we begin a discussion about curiosity. We're very curious about curiosity, and we're very curious to know how curiosity lives on the ChangeGrid. Where does it live? Why does it live there? Does it change based on where it lives? What does it do? And so got a lot of little curiosities about curiosity. And so that's what we're going to be working on today. To set the stage a little bit, this all started because of a call that Linda was on yesterday. So Linda, why don't you share with people the call you were on and how curiosity fit into that?
Oh, okay. Well, I think I may even have mentioned this to some of you, but I joined a national group called Braver Angels last year. It started in 2017. Their goal is to bring together a divided country by bringing together people of all beliefs to learn together about civil discourse and how we all can heal and move forward. So they've put together serious workshops, debates, webinars that work toward that goal. So last night was one of these forums. And it was called Can Curiosity Heal Our Divide? They had two authors who spoke on their perspectives, and then they took questions. There was over 400 people on the call. So what struck me was how it fit with tension management. Having conversations where curiosity was a ChangeGrid maneuver. So all I could picture over the whole hour and a half was all the different places on the ChangeGrid that people started and how curiosity could move them upgrid, downgrid, ingrid, outgrid. And it reminded me of our Tuesday, Thursday calls with everyone adding thoughtful ideas, quotes, questions. It really sparked a lot of deep thinking. So anyway, I mentioned that to T, and here we are.
Excellent. So I'm kind of curious, how many of you are on today's call, not because this is just something you do routinely, which just makes me love you with every fiber of my being, but how many of you are here particularly because you were curious about the subject of curiosity? So Peter's raised his hand. Okay, Kathy, there you are. Yeah, so now I'm going to throw out a few little ideas about curiosity, and then we're going to see, oh, does it fit? How does it fit? Denise also says, yep, she was curious about curiosity. Then I'm going to share a little part of this article that I've texted it over to everybody umpteen times now in the chat. So and we're not going to go through the whole thing, as I said earlier, but let's start off with the definition. If you just go to the dictionary, it says that curiosity is a strong desire to know or learn something. And I can get that, but I'm very curious to know what drives curiosity. Under what conditions is curiosity stimulated? Because there's no limit to things that we could all be curious about. Why is it that we're each curious about certain things and could not possibly care less about other things? What is driving our intention, our selection, whatever, when it comes to exploring something? So the strong desire, where does that come from? So do any of you have any ideas about what might be driving curiosity? Why some people might be curious about some things and not curious about other things? What do you think's going on?
Well, I would think that it fits their value systems and they don't know.
So David just shared two dimensions, and that's what we've been trying to identify. What are these two dimensions that give rise to value? Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, and I would add, in addition to the values, what's my belief system? I think if we see information that doesn't conform to our belief system, it's been shown to trigger cortisol, the stress hormone, and make us upset. So I think what we believe will determine what we look for.
Yeah, because as we start to pursue something we find curious, we're going to have a reaction to all the things that we're discovering as we kind of do it. And I love that you brought up cortisol, because there is a lot of science behind how neurotransmitters come into play in the whole process of curiosity, if you will. I also discovered something that says curiosity is what ultimately drives people, a culture, a civilization, up the spiral dynamics sort of evolutionary path. So it's really interesting to see how curiosity is fitting into these things. We've actually never really talked about curiosity specifically. So, yep, perspectives. So I was on this hunt for what could those two dimensions possibly be? Edie, you've unmuted. Anything you'd like to throw in?
The first thing that came to mind, that's a very good question, by the way, is I think it's a raw instinctual energy that, we see in children and we get programmed out of due to restrictive parental environments and so forth. I think it's something that gets lost, unfortunately.
Well, no, but in fact, what you've just shared is a large part of what this article is actually exploring. And so again, I think I've chatted it over to you guys enough that you all have access to the link for this article. And they do say curiosity. Well, here you go. Curiosity is a basic element of our cognition, yet its biological function, mechanisms, and neural underpinning remain poorly understood. It is nevertheless a motivator for learning, influential in decision making, and crucial for healthy development. So they're going like, there's not a whole lot that's been done as far as studying it. There's not a lot of mechanisms that support an easy way of studying it, but they get into whatever background they did find. And a large part of that background happens to do with the behavior of animals and specifically children. So we all know the curiosity killed the cat. We have a cat. We've always had cats, and cats are phenomenally curious sorts of creatures. But the same sort of behavior is seen in a lot of other animal species. They want to know something, but what is driving that desire to know something, to learn something, to figure it out? So, so history of studies of animal curiosity is nearly as long as the history of the study of human curiosity. So, talking about Pavlov and on and on and on. But I want to scroll down to one very specific section of this, and that is the function of curiosity. So I'll just read this for everyone's benefit. Although information is intangible, it has real value to any organism with the capacity to make use of it. And so going back to what David said, this quest for knowledge seems to be connected to whatever we perceive the potential value of something may be to us.
Yeah, I think that's, for me, curiosity has always been something that I had to harness and had to learn how to harness living in various cultures. So, that's why I always talk about the power of inquiry, right? Because if you think about the way the brain focuses, if the first order of business for the brain is about conserving and preserving energy, it's going to shortcut everything, and it's looking to shortcut things, and that's where it could sort of work against us. So when you make a definitive statement, the brain is going to focus like a laser. However, if you pose that same statement in a question, you open the door up for that learning. And one of the things in the studies of lifelong learners, they have an immense focus and curiosity to learn. And they're not just learning for learning's sake, just to, accumulate information. There's structure to actually what they're doing and how they want to apply that information.
I can just comment here and add on to that. This is Kathy. That my work with, competence global leaders. One of the most important competency or attributes of any successful global citizen, global leader, is learning and curiosity. The just being curious, and it just leads to success on a global level.
To add to that, Kathy, what I'm thinking is if they're global leaders, then they're good at bringing people together. And if they're curious, if they assume they don't know everything, and being curious, that's the foundation of that good communication.
It allows people to join you, and it's one of the most important things that somebody can learn on a global stage when they're doing cross-cultural work is one of the questions that I always coach people to use is help me understand.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading on the thesaurus what some of the antonyms are. And I found just one little thing. There's not much to be found, but one thing that said that the opposite of curiosity is argument. And so if you were talking about the value of curiosity in civil discourse, curiosity would kind of support that phrase we've heard, we want to seek to understand before we seek to be understood. It's about being genuinely curious, wanting to learn what other people's viewpoints are, what their perspectives are, what values they have and beliefs they have connected to whatever it is that they hold dear. And so I think it's interesting because curiosity as a position certainly disarms a lot of defensiveness. It opens up a lot of dialogue. It creates kind of an environment that's more respectful and all those good sorts of things. So I can kind of see how it fit in to the training that Linda's been going through as far as Braver Angels go. Let me continue with my little reading here because I think it's going to touch upon what Brian was saying about people who have, I'm going to call it more of a scientific curiosity. The curiosity that leads us deeper into a subject matter. Because as we move this onto the ChangeGrid, we're going to be talking about different sorts of curiosity that we each experience. And the other thing is that we're going to connect it back to this idea about value, because if in fact spiral dynamics is all about the evolution of values and curiosity is driven by values, then is it not curiosity that drives the spiral dynamic? So yeah, we can all ponder that for a while. Okay, so let me read this. So again, information is intangible. It has real value to any organism with the capacity to make use of it. I think that's important because it says curiosity is hoping for some sort of practical, beneficial sort of outcome at a certain point. As I think it was Brian said, you're not just learning stuff for the heck of learning stuff. You're looking for value, you're looking for a reason. The benefits may accrue immediately or in the future. The delayed benefits require a learning system. Not surprisingly then, the most popular theory about the function of curiosity is to motivate learning. George Lowenstein described curiosity as a cognitive-induced deprivation that arises from the perception of a gap in knowledge and understanding. Lowenstein's information gap theory holds that curiosity functions like other drive states, such as hunger, which motivates eating. Building on this theory, Lowenstein suggests that a smaller amount of information serves as a priming dose, which greatly increases curiosity. Consumption of information is rewarding, but eventually, when enough information is consumed, satiation occurs, and information serves to reduce further curiosity. So as I read that, I went like, so there's kind of like a threshold, and then there's a little of a collapse. Somewhere our attention drops. So I thought that was really interesting. So I'm going to do the second paragraph, and then I'll be done with my little readings here. But Lowenstein's idea is supported by a recent study by Kang and colleagues. They found that curiosity about the answer to a trivia question is a U-shaped function of confidence about knowing that answer. Decision makers were least curious when they had no clue about the answer, and if they were extremely confident. No, what? Did I read that right? Decision makers were least curious when they had no clue about the answer, and if they were extremely confident. Okay. They were most curious when they had some idea about the answer, but lacked confidence. In these circumstances, compulsion to know the answer was so great that they were even willing to pay for the information, even though curiosity could have been sated for free after the session. So I thought,
Mhm.
okay, so there's really is a very powerful tension element when it comes to this whole curiosity as a driving force. Thoughts about that, anyone?
Yeah,
And
it
that's what the
sounds like
word
it's,
Okay.
actually means, actually. Go ahead, Linda.
no, it just sounded to me like what we were talking about when it says what we know, what we don't know. What was
Hmm.
that again? And now I know what I don't know, and how that goes up and how that has a curve as well.
Right, for the
Exactly.
adult learning model. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right. Because that's what the root word for curiosity, if I remember Latin, it literally means careful to attention detail. So
Mhm,
if you think about from that perspective, it follows the idea of deliberate practice,
mhm.
right? And so if you're doing something deliberately, you're from a acetylcholine perspective, you're shining the spotlight on something that you want to immerse yourself in. So you just don't throw away information. You're careful with the information that you even that you acquire to start with, because you're literally looking to apply it in a unique way so that you can actually learn it at a high level.
I've always remembered, T, you said before that the acquisition of knowledge is a downgrade maneuver.
Yeah, it's true.
Hmm.
Knowledge has weight, and that weight is going to pull us down and
Hmm.
down and down and down. That's pretty much, I think, why as people get older and older, and now you get up to retirement age and even later, people have a lifetime of learning. They have accumulated a lifetime of knowledge, and for a lot of them, they figure that's enough. That's all there is to know. That's all it is. And now they become curmudgeons and
Hmm.
those little fuss budgets and all those sorts of things that come along with that, where if they maintain that curiosity about life and all of its many mysteries, they probably don't fall into that curmudgeon state. um, yeah,
Right. But
so lifetime
application is
learners.
different. So that's why
Yeah.
acquisition behaviors and application behaviors are uniquely different, because you'll hear from people who reach their threshold in acquisition. This is how we've always done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then from that perspective, there's nothing else to learn.
Yeah.
However, if, like the pandemic, taught people that you have to apply all this that in a
Hmm.
uniquely different way.
Yep.
So that challenges you, that raises your attention when you're talking about application of the acquisition.
Yes. Well, now building on what Edie said at the beginning about child development, and that if you go deeper in this article, you're going to find quite an extensive chunk of it is all about child development. And one of the things that they reference is an observational study that was done of children in spontaneous play. Just one moment. Sorry about that. Children in spontaneous play seem to have their play driven by curiosity. And so if they're outside and they're looking around, why are they digging through the grass? Why are they using their imagination to do this or that? A lot of their play is actually that quest for knowledge, that curiosity leading to that. So you'll find anyway, it's a really interesting article. I was hoping, by the way, as I open it up, I just wanted to go, where is a diagram that shows me two dimensions? When am I going to be more curious? When I'm going to be less curious? And sadly, it is not in that article, but there was lots of other good stuff. So what I felt I was able to do, though, from reading over the article, and I think it's been very much reinforced by what you guys have been talking about, is I think that we can identify what those dimensions are to at least give us an opportunity to play with this on the ChangeGrid. So I'm going to say that one of the first dimension is going to be knowledge, the level of
Mhm.
knowledge, LEDGE, that someone possesses. And I think that the second dimension, it's come up a couple times now, is the amount of perceived value or potential value, future value that something might have.
Mhm.
Now, I want to move these two labels to places on the ChangeGrid as far as the axes go. So which one do you think goes where? Where would you put it?
Now, knowledge goes mid to down grid.
Yeah, knowledge is definitely the x-axis because the definition of ability, if you think about it, is the level of knowledge, skill, and experience
Experience.
that a person has. Did I spell knowledge correctly? I've always wondered. No, it's got to have the D, or it doesn't look right. So have you ever done that? You look at a word, you kind of go like, I know that's spelled right, but it just doesn't look right. So I kind of know that knowledge is a part of curiosity, is a part of ability. And so fine, I'll put that there. And I think low and high will work. And then that would then mean that value would go over here on the y-axis. And it too would parallel perceived challenge. In my mind, I don't know that I can say that value and challenge have an obvious direct relationship. I don't think they're just replaceable words for the same dynamic or the same kind of concept we're looking at. That being said, I think that what you'll see when you start playing with this will hold true. So at first I thought value is actually a variation on importance, that the more the more valuable something is, the more potential value something may have, the more important we would declare it to be. But as I played with that, I kind of realized that what we mean by importance in the ChangeGrid dimensions is different than how I've just described importance. So importance in a ChangeGrid dimension is really more about how important is it at this particular moment, or how important is it to this particular situation. It's not about importance down the road. So I think that's where I'm kind of looking at value as being something that's got another little dynamic going on with it. Any thoughts about the placements here, the label of value?
I think in axiology, if I remember correctly, the way that they position value is to say when you valuing something, you're assigning it some meaning. So there's an element of judgment, some relevancy there, because then you're assuming potential value. So it's not just a value as an end product, so to speak, but it's a potential value along the way.
Yes.
And so they talk about that gap between the subjective perception of what could create value and the objective reality of what does create value.
And
Does that
so,
make sense?
yeah, because that would mean that the value may not actually be realized until
Right,
some other point down the road.
right.
So, in fact, we were watching I don't know if you guys have seen the TV show Psych. It was on for several years about the guy who's he's the comedic psychic detective kind of a guy. Well, every episode begins with his dad, who's a police detective, teaching him some apparently obscure, pointless little thing. And last night it was how to kick out the tail lights of a car when you're trapped in the trunk. And lo and behold, the episode ended up showing, because of course at the moment the kid is going like, when will I ever need this? What is this? When is this ever going to happen? And immediately the dad throws the kid in the trunk and says, well, now. And so, but it was interesting to go like, well, the value of that little piece of learning was very much delayed. And so I thought that's an interesting illustration of what you're talking about there. Okay, so any other thoughts about this before we start playing with it?
T, this is,
Yes.
I have a thought, and it alludes to what you said earlier, that knowledge is weighty. I think with values too, that as I find when I get older, the things that I valued earlier aren't as important, and other things are important. So what I value can change, through my various stages of the life cycle.
I think you're absolutely right. It could be very certain. I mean, imagine right now if I don't think anyone on the call is in Texas, but can you imagine right now in Texas how a lot of skills that we may have learned long, long ago could be very valuable right now, because many of them are in kind of a survival sort of a situation. So yeah. Denise, I think you had your hand up. Did you want to chime something in, or you're just stretching? All right. Well, you feel free to unmute and share anything you'd like to share. Oh, Denise is from Texas. That's why she was raising her hand there. So obviously you've got some electricity, or you couldn't be on the call right now. So, but we have friends in Austin and Dallas and Houston, and they've just been slammed, just slammed. Okay, so here what I'd like to do is just give you guys 4 scenarios, and I want you to describe for me what the role curiosity may be in there. Does curiosity exist there? Is it active? Is it passive? Whatever. So the first situation, you are in a situation where you possess relatively low knowledge, not necessarily zero, so appreciate there's a scale here, but relatively low knowledge, and you perceive relatively low value. Do you think that there'll be any kind of behavior related to curiosity going on when you view low level of knowledge, low level of value? It could be really low, it could be moderately. What do you think? How about curiosity when you are in a low knowledge, low value sort of a situation?
This is Kathy. I would say your curiosity would be limited there.
Limited. Limited to what sorts of things do you think?
Well,
So
well,
give me an
I
example.
wouldn't be pushed might be the right word. I wouldn't feel the need to be curious, because I think that if the value and knowledge levels are both low, I would need the value level to be higher in order to create stress for me to be even curious about something. I might be curious, I might look at it and say, isn't that interesting? But do I need to know more? Not necessarily. So that's kind of how I see it. I feel like the value level needs to be pushed up a little bit to create enough tension to be able to want to move into curiosity.
Okay. All right. Good, good, good.
Mhm.
Other thoughts to throw in on that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would think you, in terms of the value, you would need more meaning there, or else it's just not going to move you enough. Like, I think of this curiosity. Have you ever seen the model for experiential learning?
Now tell us about that.
It has and in my mind reflects what curiosity is about, because it has these axes, perception continuum and a processing continuum, and on one side is active experimentation, the doing, and the other side is reflective observation, the watching. And that to me describes what curiosity is about, because you need both. If you're actually applying something that you acquired for specific reasons of learning so that you can learn even more and continue that continuum, if you will, at even a higher level of consciousness, it's not you just pick up information, you got it, you deposit it, and you're done with it. There's a continuum. So you need both active and reflective.
Okay, great. There's something about that I want to say, but I need to delay what I want to say for a moment because I want to show you something. I'm still kind of curious. Do you guys believe, I'm curious. Do you guys believe that any curiosity whatsoever would exist in the in-grid quadrants? And it sounds like Kathy was saying, yeah, there's a little bit, but it's not
Limited.
like it's anything purposeful or intentional or whatever.
Well, Keith, it's something
Right.
that you don't really value and you don't know much about. You know, it's difficult to inspire curiosity.
Yeah, it's difficult, but all right, I'll just go ahead and give you guys. Yeah, Peter, go ahead. Share what you have
Yeah,
to
it
share.
reminds me of a quote that I read one time. The ignorance of our ignorance breeds overconfidence.
Oh, there's one to
Wow.
meditate on. That's so
I
true.
just wrote that down, by the way.
Did you?
That's great.
That's wonderful. The ignorance of our ignorance is
Overconfidence. The ignorance of our ignorance breeds overconfidence.
breeds overconfidence. That's really powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
would just say to you here, I don't necessarily, I'm not sure I would say that for all of the in-grid sector, but certainly for the lower levels of the in-grid sector. And I think it shifts the higher you go towards 6. is all I'm saying.
Yeah, in fact, let me just do this real quick. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to grab that, copy those, go to this diagram, paste them. I think this is what Kathy's kind of alluding to. Now, if we're still in that Ingrid quadrant, we still have all 5 levels of tension in their exact proportions. But nevertheless, I'm going to be more curious about something that would be relatively upgrid, even if I'm confined to that one Ingrid quadrant. So that would make sense. So at first I thought, well, come on. If I look at the engagement rings, there's no awareness there. There's no nothing. And then I thought, and this happened. I'll show you something. In fact, I'm just going to throw it on the screen, then I'll explain my story. I saw this. Okay, you guys can all see them, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And I kind of went like, how does evolution explain that? Okay. This is a real creature. This is a proboscis monkey. And so I'm kind of going like, well, I'm very curious about that. But it's not curiosity with any real tangible, practical drive behind it. It's the curiosity that we all have when we're just otherwise passing the day. We stumble across something, we go like, oh, well, that's interesting, that's curious. And so you go and you explore it. And I never did get my answer to the question of how evolution explains this, but somehow or another, evolution, and I don't think for a moment it was just one thing. There was a whole thing of creatures. Look at this guy. It's kind of like, how did that come to be? That, by the way, is called an axolotl. And it's a real creature. And so I think that oftentimes, particularly with something like the internet, so readily available to us, how many of you have just been trapped in one of those little wormholes where you're just suddenly doing a deep dive? I guess it's a rabbit hole where you're just diving and diving, and it's for no real reason other than in that moment you thought, that's curious, I got a question about that, I'm going to go look at it. Now, do I think there'll come a point in my life where having a little bit of knowledge about a proboscis monkey is going to be valuable to me? Well, I will later on in our exploration give you the situation where that may hold true.
Well, as an anthropologist, those are things that anthropologists study.
Exactly. So someone would look at this same thing. And that was my whole point. Why do some people find a specific thing deeply curious while other people kind of go like, why would you be curious about that? What difference does that make? So I do think that that's kind of an example of kind of in-grid curiosity. I don't really know anything about it, honestly, till I saw the picture. And when I first saw the picture, I thought it was a very beautiful, like computer animated, generated. I didn't think that was real. And lo and behold, it's real. So I had very, very little knowledge. Obviously, I didn't perceive a whole lot of value other than whatever value one finds in satisfying one's curiosities about just minutia in life. So does that feel like go ahead, David?
I'm sorry.
No.
I was just going to say, are we going to link curiosity with engagement?
Well, and that's what I thought I would actually do if I go to the engagement rings. Most of this in-grid quadrant, in fact, well, why don't I just go ahead and do that? Most of this in-grid quadrant, let me go ahead and paste it. Most of this in-grid quadrant is about what do I say? An experience of life we don't even have a word to describe. And then pre-aware is that kind of like moment just before, oh, wow, that's real. And then you get aware enough, if you'll notice at the exact center of the change grid, you are still able to touch into that awareness kind of a thing. But I have no intention around or anything like that. But relatively speaking, on that outgrid side of things, how do I put this? If I can shrink the entirety of the change grid to fit into the in-grid quadrant, does it not also hold true that I should be able to shrink all of the layers into that quadrant as well and still find a certain level of truth to it? So did I become aware of something? Yes. Did I then go, okay, I got to click on that? So there was some intention. I did click on it and I did read what I found. So there was some engagement, but I promise you I was not out here in the outgrid area of power. I certainly wasn't there. In how do I put that? Compared to how my other life experiences of being outgrid in power would end up feeling like. So again, it's relative. Thoughts about that? Is that is that
Mhm.
is that okay? I guess. Does
Yeah,
that?
I've seen things that I've been interested in
Mhm.
that drew some curiosity, but I wasn't committed to it as I would be with like something in healthcare, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, so I mean, how often do we find ourselves picking up a magazine and we're just trying to pass the time? That was our whole intention, is to just pass the time. And for whatever reasons, we chose to pass the time by picking up a magazine. I even wonder if it was curiosity that compelled us to pick up the magazine. So something is going on. My point is, there is a curiosity that is happening there. And if we go to the adult learning model, we would say that in that in-grid quadrant, you are that unconscious incompetent, but now you've become aware of something, and that has moved your attention up a little bit, maybe out a little bit. And that would slowly but surely move you relatively. Go ahead, Linda.
I'm saying when we were talking about the curiosity um, of why did I pick that up? That's the whole basis of marketing, to create enough curiosity to make you
Mhm.
look into what they're selling.
That's right, because the headline grabs your eye and compels you to read the subtitle. The subtitle should compel you on reading the opening paragraph. The opening paragraph should pull you in. So I guess it's following curiosity build, if you will.
Yeah, or a
It's
picture on the front
something,
of the magazine that you
right?
go, ooh,
It's got to pull you in. It has to pull you in.
I
Yep.
think what's interesting to me about this from a neuroscience perspective is when something captures your attention, there's something in you, in other words, that's resonating with that. So something resonates with you, within you, that captures your attention through the reticular activation system. It picks up on things that you have some tie to, some connect to. It tends to line up with your belief system. So you build on this curiosity over time. And I think that's where these thresholds and that kind of thing come in. So there's a real structure to it. That's what's interesting to me about this. I don't know how to articulate the structure, but there's nothing that captures your attention that isn't a mirror, so to speak. That's just how the brain functions. It functions just like, a mirror is that precise.
Yes.
So when, something triggers someone and they're angry, it's not necessarily an event. There's something going on in you that triggered that, because the same event happened to the same two people and one person respond a certain way, another person respond. We can't say the event caused it.
Right. Right.
So it's the same thing with curiosity. That's what's interesting about this. So I'm interested in reading the paper to see if I can
What do they
expand on
share?
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
To
Other thoughts?
me,
Yes. Go ahead.
yeah, I'm just wondering too, when we keep talking about belief system, in my first book, Why Cats Don't Bark, I used another man's book, what is it called? The Soul's Code. And I'm wondering, and that's the belief, I guess, that we all come into this world with a certain calling in life. And does that drive us to, I mean,
Yeah.
some in my family are natural mechanics. I mean, by 5 years old, my brother was taking, that is his calling in life. So I think there's something on the spiritual level that we might be missing here. And then the other thing, I studied with J.L. Moreno, the father of psychodrama. And when I think of curiosity, this keeps coming into my head when he said, when I do role playing with some people, they will not get out of their own skin. And I remember him saying that if they're not secure enough with who they are, they can't expand or explore another realm or another behavior, which is part of what propels curiosity. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
That
Absolutely.
if we're not secure in ourselves, we're not open-minded enough, which is part of curiosity as well. So I think, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, really good. Well, let me build on that because beliefs have come up a couple of times, and so um, I want to move us into this upgrade quadrant. And as I do, I'm going to expand value for just for the sake of the conversation. But the upgrade scenario would be you possess relatively low level of knowledge at present, but you perceive a high level of value in the moment or in the future. So that's the little dynamic there. For whatever reasons, it's become far more valuable to you. Now, to help us understand this and apply it to a lot of different life areas, particularly if we're working with one of our clients and talking about curiosity or helping them to cultivate greater levels of curiosity, it's important that we revisit your basic training in tension management. One of the things we talked about was value, and how value and control work hand in hand. The more valuable you perceive something as being, it is because of the amount of control you feel it's bringing you in the moment. So control equals value, value equals control. If you want someone to believe that something has value, they have to see that it's going to help them to enhance their sense of control. It's useful to them, etc. So, but I talked about 4 different values. There's 4 different categories of value. And I'm not going to put you guys on the spot, but so at this point, I'll just say, do you guys remember us talking about value in greater detail? Yeah.
I remember the value farming.
Value,
That was,
yeah, value focused farming. Yeah, that was one of the techniques for doing lead generation. So kind of a different
okay.
application of this value idea, but yeah, so this would be all the way back to the nature of change in its most full form. We talked about value, and I talked a little bit about
Aesthetic value.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes. Okay. I remember the aesthetic value. Now the others aren't coming to memory.
Okay,
Now that
anybody
you say
else
that.
remember one? All right, here goes. There are 4 kinds of value, and the keywords for each one of them, going back to if you study any kind of like French sorts of philosophy, it's life, gain, goodness, and beauty. So that means life would be survival value, gain would be economic value, goodness is moral value, and beauty is aesthetic value. So if we're evaluating anything at all, looking at anything, whatever it is, an object to buy, a solution to put into place, we're going to examine it against those 4 values. And so does it offer a survival value? Can I eat it, defend myself with it, live inside of it, warm my home with it? It's like, does it have survival value? The other kind of value I could be very interested in is economic value. Does this allow me some way to save for a rainy day? Is this going to bring me more resources? Is this going to help me to better protect the resources that I have? Is this the better use of whatever resources? As we go through those kinds of thoughts, we're trying to establish the economic value that something might offer us. Now, goodness is where we get into our belief systems. This is about moral value. Does it align with what we hold near and dear in terms of the principles that govern our lives? If it matches our belief system, if it supports what we consider to be essential to our existence, to humanity, etc., we could bestow upon it a tremendous amount of moral value. And then certainly, if it's nice to look at, nice to hold, if it brings us joy or pleasure in one way or another, we could deem it as having a certain amount of aesthetic value. As we go about evaluating something, these values also come into conflict with one another once in a while. So for example, what if something could bring you tremendous economic value, but it would breach your moral values?
Mhm.
How does that affect your forward movement? Or let's say that in the moment, something offers you tremendous survival value, but at the expense of the economic value. that you have already accumulated, or you really have bestow upon it a lot of aesthetic value, but it's going to mess up your economic value or whatever the case may be. So sometimes these values do get into conflict with one another. Nevertheless, they're always present, and we're always hoping to find some way to get them satisfied. Obviously, not all situations are going to touch upon all of the different values, but one way or another, if we are going to pay much attention to it, and I'm talking about deep attention, not just figuring out what a proboscis monkey is all about, but something that actually has some real substantial practical value now or in the future, it's got to be because it resonates with those four kinds of things. So thoughts about life gain, goodness, and beauty? Peter, your hand was up. Go ahead and share whatever you want.
Yes, what I think too, what we do is the power of denial is that what's unpleasant that we don't want to address, we deny. So I think that would be the goodness, the moral value that if I'm making a living, let's say making missiles, I can't entertain that this could destroy a country or humanity. So I have to make up a story on protecting our country. Or if I'm a fuel invested in fuel and oil, I have to deny that climate change is happening. So I would think that denial would play a huge impact in allowing us to be out of integrity as we pursue our economic gain.
And I think you've also described what people who have gone to war experience, because on the one hand, their moral values would say, I'm not going to destroy other people's property. I'm not going to disrupt other people's lives. I'm certainly not going to take other people's lives or injure them in any sort of a way. But the rules of war and their position being there changes all that. So it's very interesting. Says that for survival value alone, maybe you'll compromise moral value. So, yep. Okay, other thoughts about value and the ways it plays out in our lives?
I've read stories about that, how people will have these stringent values around human life, but then, especially in some of the places I lived, when their family members are killed, they're all for the death penalty.
Yeah, right.
So there's that kind of drastic change.
Yeah, and it plays out in every scenario you can come up with where people will behave. I like the way that Peter just put it. They will kind of set aside the integrity of their overall value system because the circumstances, I don't know, dictate a new way of looking at things. Anyway, we can get into that in grand detail, but going back to a little combination here, high perceived value one way or another, low level of knowledge. Do you believe you're going to find curiosity will come into play there?
Yes.
And how is that curiosity different than T finding out what a proboscis monkey is all about?
I would think that
it's about the value. It's about the value. Yeah.
Yeah. Fits our core values a little bit more. Those do change over time, or modify, I should say, maybe not change, but they fit our core values. And that lack of perceived knowledge would probably cause us to take action.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Could I build on that a little bit?
Please do.
Take action that, in a sense, to protect biodiversity. So how do we, now if we're saying, well, we're heading towards a mass extinction, many feel,
yes.
How do we protect the biodiversity so that creatures like that can survive, and that we can recognize how necessary this diversity is?
And again, I kind of even hear in that a movement up that spiral dynamic we talked about for several sessions, as our values tend to change. Our values are always evolving. I'm going to throw a word out. I'd like you guys to explain upgrade curiosity by incorporating the word and the concept of gaining control, or control period. So why am I curious? What does that have to do with control? What does control have to do with curiosity?
Well, value equals control. And if there's something that we highly value, it's got to be central to our own definition of control.
And from the sales training program, one of the slides that I put up says, the more something a person feels, the more something a solution becomes. Does anyone remember what the two somethings are? Anyone remember back to that? The more out of control a person feels, the more valuable the solution becomes.
Right.
So how much are you willing to pay for a bottle of water?
Or a bottle of hand sanitizer.
Or a bottle of hand sanitizer, or today in Texas to have a house of reliable heat, you know? So what are you willing to pay in order to have these things? The more out of control a person feels, the more valuable the solution becomes. And so obviously, if I am in a situation where I feel I don't have enough knowledge or understanding, but I'm feeling very much out of control, is it at all surprising that I'm going to do whatever I can do to learn whatever I need to learn, to gain whatever I need to gain? So to me, the curiosity kind of falls more into the category of problem solving curiosity as opposed to passing the time curiosity. Sort of things. Does that, and again, we're just talking about general feelings as we move into these four quadrants. When we start looking at exact plotting points, I'm sure there's all the subtleties and nuances we found as we look at every other layer of the change grid. But I can certainly say, oh, when I'm upgrade, I'm curious, but my curiosity has a very focused intention. My curiosity has a purpose. My curiosity is being driven by the fact that I'm upgrade right now. I feel out of control, however that happens to be expressing itself. Does
And
that match up?
that may even be when somebody just grasps at the very first thing that somebody's mentioning or offering to them that'll give them that control. And that's when I believe the curiosity stops.
Say that again, Linda. The moment someone finds out that they
Okay,
have,
so I believe that when someone is that far upgrade, they will grab at anything that someone offers.
oh,
And
right. Yeah.
that is the minute that curiosity would stop.
Yeah, because, and I think what you're talking about there matches what we've said before about wanting a life ring. So if someone is way upgrade, feeling totally out of control, and anybody throws them a life ring, they're going to grab hold of that life ring. And so at least in that moment, they're going to go like, okay, I'm set now. And maybe the curiosity is going to be less, but they may, after holding on to that life ring for a while, realize that the life ring isn't quite as protective as they hoped it was going to be, or that life ring carries with it tremendous costs in terms of other values that they have. And so they start looking for other ways of doing things. Okay, excellent. All right, so now let's think about what happens. That person who's very far upgraded, who by the way is now the conscious incompetent, starts to explore and understand and learn. And although we're talking primarily about knowledge for curiosity, I would like to think that to a certain degree, skill and experience also are going to come into play. So they're proving out the knowledge as being valid and useful or whatever, but the emphasis is on the knowledge piece for this discussion at any rate. So the knowledge is going up, 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 up. They are exploring it, they're learning, they're gaining, all those good sorts of things are happening. What direction are they moving now on the grid?
Down grid.
They're moving down, and they're also moving
Little in.
little. Actually, as ability increases, movement goes from upgrid to
Out.
outgrid,
Oh,
but they might not be very far outgrid at all. They might just be outgrid enough to go like, okay, we got this solved. I'm on top of this. So if I said to you, I'd like to know what outgrid, what's curiosity about outgrid? What's there? It's like my thread is over. So I'm not just curious about ways that I can gain greater levels of control. Now my curiosity may be stimulated further. Why? Why? And I'll let you guys kind of share a couple of ideas now, but we're at the top of the hour, so we'll probably finish this out on Tuesday's call. But I want to talk about outgrid and downgrid curiosity. What's going on there? So, okay, what do you guys think? So I've moved from outgrid. I'm no longer out of control. I've seized control. That's how I'm ending up in power right now. If I want to switch it to the levels of tension, what happens to curiosity now? Does it stop? Does it change? What happens to curiosity?
It's more intense.
Becomes more intense. But what's driving that curiosity now?
It's
Was
application. It's the ability to gain more.
the ability to gain more. Tell us more about that.
We're talking about outgrid curiosity, right?
Outgrid curiosity.
Yeah. You've satisfied a certain level of curiosity, but in the understanding that more curiosity can buy you more. It can either engage more people or gain you more power or gain you more status or whatever it is that drives you to achieve more in the outgrid quadrant. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, to me, it makes sense. How about the rest of you guys? Is it making good sense?
Sure.
Yeah. And so I think what I'd like to do then for Tuesday is to finish up this discussion about curiosity. But now it's not like the curiosity that passes time. It's not the curiosity that solves problems. Now it's the curiosity that helps people to expand and grow and do all those sorts of things that the outgrid energy, the driver energy is hoping to achieve. So curiosity for the sake of achievement, or curiosity's role in achievement. That's what we want to do a deep dive into. And then certainly we're going to find some role of curiosity downgrid as well, but that's outgrid is the one I'd like you guys to be thinking about, because again, it's great to have these conversations, but ultimately we want this to be something that helps us better understand ourselves and our clients. And so for that objective, it's like, how would you work with a client to exercise and apply their curiosity to help them move from wherever they are to wherever it is they would need to be next, or they want to be next. Okay, questions, comments, thoughts?
No, thank you.
No? All right, so
Yeah,
stay
thank you very
curious.
much.
You're welcome. Stay
Thank you.
curious, stay curious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, but one thing, so I don't forget it, somewhere those 4 types of value, I originally wasn't going to tell you what the 4 types of value were until we got to the outgrid quadrant. So without saying anything else, there must have been some reason why T was going to delay identifying or reminding us about the 4 types of value outgrid for a reason. What could his reason have possibly been? That got hijacked because we started talking about beliefs. So it came up for the upgrade kind of things. But there you go. So how do those 4 different types of value also fit into the curiosity one finds outgrid? Okay, that's your homework. Everyone have a wonderful weekend. We'll talk again on Tuesday. So bye, everybody.
Thanks, Steve. Bye.
Bye.